The message came at midnight, when the stars outside the station window burned like cold fire against the black emptiness of space. Kang Tae-ho was reading when the guards arrived. 2 Veth soldiers stood at his door, their silver skin glowing faintly in the dim light. They were tall, almost 2 meters each, and they looked at him the way one might look at a small animal. "The Empress summons you," one of them said. His voice was flat and cold. "You will come now." Tae-ho closed his book slowly. He had been on the Veth Imperial Station for 3 years now, serving as Earth's diplomatic representative. In all that time, he had never once spoken to the Empress directly. He had seen her only from a distance. During ceremonies and celebrations, she was a figure of power and fear. The ruler of 40 star systems. The woman who held humanity's fate in her hands. "May I ask why?" Tae-ho said. The guard did not answer. He simply turned and began walking, expecting Tae-ho to follow. Tae-ho followed. The corridors of the Imperial Station were beautiful and cold. The walls were made of a white metal that seemed to glow from within. Veth art decorated every surface, strange shapes and symbols that Tae-ho had spent years learning to understand. The Veth were an ancient people. They had traveled the stars for 10,000 years before humans even learned to make fire. And yet, they were dying. Tae-ho had heard the rumors. Everyone had. The great noble families of the Veth Dominion were failing. Each generation was weaker than the last. Children were born sick, or not born at all. The Empress herself had only one child, a daughter, and there would be no more. The guards led him through a massive door into the throne chamber. Tae-ho had never been inside this room before. It was vast, larger than any space he had ever seen. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above, and the floor was made of black glass that reflected the light of 1,000 small stars embedded in the walls. At the far end of the room sat the Empress. Empress Vethara was old, though it was hard to tell with the Veth. Their kind lived for 500 years or more. Her silver skin was smooth, but her eyes held the weight of centuries. She wore robes of deep purple, and a crown of light floated above her head, casting strange shadows across her face. Tae-ho walked forward and stopped at the proper distance. He bowed, not too deep, not too shallow. He had learned the Veth ways well. "Kang Tae-ho," the Empress said. Her voice echoed through the chamber. "Human, representative of Earth, Your Imperial Majesty," Tae-ho replied. "Do you know why I have called you here?" "I do not, Majesty." The Empress studied him for a long moment. Her eyes were like pools of liquid silver, and they seemed to see right through him. 15 years ago, she said, your world was dying. The Rift War had broken your fleet. The enemy was coming to burn your cities and kill your people. Do you remember? "I remember," Tae-ho said. He had been 17 then. A boy watching the sky for signs of death. "We saved you," the Empress continued. "The Veth Dominion sent our ships to defend your world. We drove back the enemy. We gave humanity a future. Earth is grateful," Tae-ho said carefully. "Gratitude is a word," the Empress said. "I require action." She stood from her throne and walked down the steps toward him. Despite her age, she moved with perfect grace. She stopped just a few meters away, close enough that Tae-ho could see the faint glow of the bioluminescent markings on her skin. "My bloodline is dying," she said. "For 1,000 generations, we have bred for perfection. We chose the strongest, the most intelligent, the most beautiful. We created the greatest ruling family in the galaxy." She paused. "And in doing so, we destroyed ourselves." Tae-ho said nothing. He understood now why he was here, and the understanding filled him with cold dread. "Our scientists have studied your kind," the Empress continued. "Humans are young, primitive, short-lived. But your genetics are remarkable. You adapt. You change. You survive things that should kill you. Your DNA is flexible in ways ours has forgotten how to be." She looked at him with those ancient, terrible eyes. "You will marry my daughter," she said. "You will give our line strong heirs. You will save the Veth Dominion." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Taeho's heart was pounding, but he kept his face calm. He had learned long ago that showing fear to the Veth was dangerous. "Your Majesty," he said slowly, "I am honored beyond words. But humans do not arrange marriages. We choose our partners freely. I cannot simply agree to this." The Empress smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You misunderstand me, human. I am not asking. I am telling. And if I refuse, then Earth's protection ends." The Empress's voice was as cold as the void between stars. "The treaty that shields your world exists because I wish it to exist. One word from me, and your people will stand alone against a galaxy that sees them as nothing more than animals. How long do you think Earth would survive?" Taeho felt something cold settle in his stomach. He thought of his mother, still living in the small village where he grew up. He thought of the children in the streets of Seoul, the farmers in the fields, the billions of people who had no idea that their fate was being decided in this moment. "You would destroy an entire world," he said quietly, "because one man refused to marry?" "I would do what is necessary to save my people," the Empress replied, "just as you will do what is necessary to save yours." She turned and walked back to her throne. "You will be moved to the Imperial Palace on Veth Prime," she said. "You will meet my daughter. You will learn our ways more deeply. And in time, you will give me grandchildren, who will carry both our bloodlines into the future." "And if the princess does not want this?" Taeho asked. "My daughter will do her duty, as all of us must." The guards appeared at Taeho's side. "Take him to his new quarters," the Empress commanded. "See that he has everything he needs. He is to be treated with respect. After all, he will soon be family." The guards led Taeho out of the throne chamber. His mind was racing, but his feet moved automatically, one step after another, carrying him toward a future he had never imagined. His new quarters were in the palace section of the station. The rooms were large and beautiful, filled with Veth art and soft furniture. The window looked out at the stars, and somewhere among them was Earth, impossibly far away. Taeho sat on the edge of the bed and put his head in his hands. He tried to send a message to Earth, but his communications had been blocked. He tried to access the station's network, but he was locked out. He was trapped, isolated, completely alone. Outside the window, the stars burned on, cold and indifferent. Taeho looked at them for a long time. Then he stood up, walked to the small desk in the corner, and began to write. If he was going to survive this, he needed to understand everything. The Veth, the Empress, the princess he had never met, and most importantly, he needed to find a way out. But deep in his heart, he already knew the truth. There was no way out. There was only forward, into whatever darkness waited for him. He was a prisoner in a palace of light, and no one was coming to save him. The shuttle descended through clouds of pale gold toward the surface of Veth Prime. Taeho watched through the window as the planet revealed itself below. A world of white cities and silver forests, of mountains that touched the sky and oceans that glowed with bioluminescent life. It was beautiful, and it was his prison. The Imperial Palace stood at the center of the capital city, a structure so massive that it seemed impossible. Towers of crystal and metal rose toward the heavens, connected by bridges that floated on invisible forces. Gardens hung from every level, filled with plants that Taeho had never seen before, their leaves shimmering with inner light. The guards led him through corridors that seemed to go on forever. Servants stopped to stare at him, their silver faces showing expressions of curiosity and disgust. A human in the Imperial Palace. To them, it must have seemed like finding an insect in their food. Finally, they reached his chambers. They were larger than his entire apartment back on Earth, filled with furniture that adjusted itself to his body, windows that could show any view in the galaxy, and a bed that seemed to float in the center of the room. "You will wait here," the guard said. Taeho waited. Hours passed. He explored his chambers, finding a library of Veth texts, a collection of musical instruments he did not know how to play, and a small garden on the balcony where strange flowers bloomed in colors he had no names for. He was reading when the door opened. Princess Sola entered without announcement. She was tall, like all Veth, with silver skin that seemed to glow in the soft light. Her hair was white, falling past her shoulders like a waterfall of moonlight. Her eyes were deep purple, and they looked at Taeho with cold indifference. She wore a gown of pale blue that moved like water around her body. She was beautiful in the way that a blade was beautiful. Sharp and dangerous and cold. "So," she said, "you are the human." Taeho stood and bowed respectfully. "I am Kang Taeho. It is an honor to meet you, Princess." Sola walked around him slowly, studying him like one might study a strange animal. "You are smaller than I expected. Your skin is so dark, and your eyes are so strange. Do all humans look like this?" "Humans come in many forms," Taeho replied calmly. "We have different skin colors, different eye colors, different shapes and sizes. It is one of our strengths." "Strength?" Sola laughed, but there was no joy in it. "Your people have been in space for barely 200 years. You fight wars over small patches of land on a single planet. You die before you even reach your 100th year. What strength could you possibly have?" Taeho met her eyes. Many men would have looked away from that cold gaze, but he did not. "We learn quickly," he said. "We adapt. We survive things that should destroy us. And we never give up, even when the odds are against us." Sola seemed surprised by his calm response. She had expected him to cower, to beg, to show fear. Instead, he spoke to her as an equal. "My mother thinks your blood can save our line," she said. "She thinks that mixing your primitive genetics with our perfect ones will somehow make our children stronger. I think it is foolishness." "Perhaps," Taeho said, "but your perfect genetics are killing you. Perhaps a little imperfection is exactly what you need." For a moment, something flickered in Sola's eyes. Anger? Interest? It was gone before Taeho could identify it. "I did not choose this," she said quietly. "I do not want to marry you. I do not want to carry your children. But I will do my duty, because that is what I was born to do." "And I did not choose this either," Taeho replied. "But here we are, two prisoners pretending to be partners." Sola stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked toward the door. "We will speak again," she said. "Try not to embarrass yourself before then." She left, and Taeho was alone once more. The days that followed were strange and difficult. Taeho was given teachers to help him learn the deeper customs of the Veth court. He studied their history, their art, their music, their religion. He learned the 1,000 small rules that governed how one spoke, how one moved, how one breathed in the presence of royalty. And he learned about Admiral Korath. Korath was the supreme commander of the Veth military, a hero of a dozen wars, a legend among his people. He was also, Taeho learned, deeply opposed to the marriage. To Korath, humans were barely better than animals. The idea of a human marrying into the royal family was an insult to everything the Veth had built. Taeho saw Korath only once, from a distance. The admiral was massive even by Veth standards, with battle scars marking his silver skin and eyes that burned with hatred when they looked at the human. "Be careful of that one," his teacher warned him. "He has powerful friends and dangerous ideas." Meanwhile, on the other side of the palace, Dr. Yuna Park was working. Yuna had come to Veth Prime 3 years ago as part of a medical exchange program. She was the only human allowed to work in the Veth healing centers, studying their advanced technology while sharing human medical knowledge. It was a position of little power, but great access. She had heard about Taeho's situation, and she knew what it meant. If this marriage failed, if something happened to Taeho, the consequences for Earth could be terrible. Late at night, when the guards changed shifts and the surveillance systems had gaps, she found a way to send a coded message to the ESS Horizon, the only human warship in this sector of space. "Taeho is in danger. Political situation unstable. Faction opposed to Human Veth Alliance gaining strength. Watch and wait for my signal." Captain Hyun-woo Baek received the message in his quarters. He read it 3 times, then deleted it from his system. He knew he could not act openly. Earth Command had made it clear that they could not risk a war with the Veth Dominion. Humanity was too weak, too small, too fragile. But Bake was not the type of man to abandon one of his own. He began making quiet preparations. Back in the palace, Taeho continued his strange new life. He saw Sola rarely, and when he did, she treated him with cold politeness. But he noticed that she sometimes watched him when she thought he was not looking, and he noticed that her coldness seemed forced, like armor she wore to protect herself. One evening, she came to his chambers unannounced. Taeho was sitting by the window, reading a book of Veth poetry in the original language. It was difficult, and he struggled with many of the words, but he was determined to understand these people who held his fate. Sola stopped in the doorway, surprised. "You read our poetry?" she asked. "I try," Taeho said. "This one is about the death of stars. I think. The metaphors are difficult." Sola walked closer, looking at the book over his shoulder. "That poem was written by Emperor Veth III, 2,000 years ago," she said. "He wrote it after watching his wife die. It is about loss. About the emptiness that remains when something precious is gone." She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. "No one has read that poem to me since I was a child. My father used to read it to me before he died." Taeho looked up at her. In this moment, she did not look like a cold princess. She looked like a lonely young woman, trapped by duty and expectation. Just like him. "I am sorry about your father," he said. Sola met his eyes. For the first time, she did not look at him with contempt or indifference. She looked at him with something that might have been curiosity, or perhaps recognition. "You are strange," she said quietly. "You should hate me. You should hate all of us, for what we have done to you. But instead, you sit here reading our poetry and trying to understand us." "Hate takes too much energy," Taeho said, "and it does not help anyone." Sola studied him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she paused. "Perhaps," she said without looking back, "you are not as primitive as I thought." She left, and Taeho smiled for the first time since coming to this world. It was a small thing. That moment of connection. But in the cold palace of an alien empire, small things mattered. Outside the window, the twin moons of Veth Prime rose into the sky, casting silver light across a world that was slowly, carefully, beginning to change. Weeks passed, and the palace slowly became less strange to Taeho. He learned the rhythm of Veth life, the formal ceremonies of morning, the quiet meditations of evening, the endless social dances of the noble court. He learned which servants could be trusted and which reported everything to Admiral Korath. He learned how to walk through halls filled with beings who hated him without showing fear. And he learned about Sola. The courtship rituals began on a cold morning, when the sky above Veth Prime turned the color of pale roses. Taeho was taken to the Temple of Ancestors, a building older than human civilization, where the spirits of dead emperors and empresses were said to watch over their descendants. Sola waited for him there, dressed in ceremonial robes of gold and white. Her face was calm, but Taeho had learned to read the small signs of her emotions. The tension in her shoulders, the slight tightness around her eyes. She was nervous, though she would never admit it. The ceremony was complex and beautiful. Taeho had spent days memorizing every gesture, every word, every moment of silence. He moved through it with careful grace, surprising the watching nobles with his attention to detail. When he spoke the ancient words of respect to Sola's ancestors, his pronunciation was nearly perfect. When he performed the traditional offerings of light and water, his movements were smooth and sure. Sola watched him with growing surprise. She had expected him to stumble, to embarrass himself, to prove that he was nothing but a primitive creature wearing borrowed clothes. Instead, he honored her traditions with genuine respect. After the ceremony, they walked together through the temple gardens. The plants here were ancient, their roots reaching down into the stone foundations of the building, their leaves drinking in the light of 3 suns. "You did well," Sola said. It was not quite a compliment, but it was close. "I had good teachers," Taeho replied, "and I wanted to do this properly." "Your ancestors deserve respect. They were conquerors and warriors," Sola said. They built an empire on the bones of defeated enemies. They do not need the respect of a human. Perhaps not, Taeho agreed. But I give it anyway. Because respect costs nothing and gains much. Sola was quiet for a long moment. They walked in silence past flowers that glowed with inner fire and trees that sang soft melodies in the wind. Why do you try so hard? She finally asked. You could simply go through the motions. Pretend to follow our customs while hating us in your heart. No one would blame you. Taeho stopped walking and turned to face her. Because that is not who I am, he said simply. I was taught that when you are a guest in someone's home, you respect their ways. Even if you did not choose to be there. Even if you would rather be somewhere else. We are not hosts, Sola said. Yes, Taeho agreed. But that does not change who I choose to be. Something shifted in Sola's expression. The cold mask she always wore seemed to crack, just a little, revealing something softer underneath. You are very strange, Kang Taeho, she said quietly. So I have been told. The weeks continued, and the courtship deepened. They spent more time together. First in formal settings, then in quieter moments. Sola began to visit his chambers in the evenings, and they would talk for hours about everything and nothing. She told him about her childhood in the palace, about the endless lessons and expectations, about the loneliness of being born to rule. She had never been allowed to have friends. Every relationship was political. Every conversation had hidden meanings. She had never known what it was like to simply be herself. Taeho told her about Earth, about the small village where he grew up, surrounded by mountains and rice fields, about his mother, who still lived in the same house where she had raised him, about the taste of rain in summer and the sound of crickets at night. It sounds simple, Sola said, and beautiful. It was, Taeho agreed. I miss it every day. Do you hate us for taking you away from it? Taeho thought carefully before answering. I hated your mother, at first, he admitted. I hated this palace, and everyone in it. But hate is like poison. It hurts the one who holds it more than the one it is aimed at. So I let it go. How? Sola asked. How do you simply let go of hate? By understanding, Taeho said. Your mother did what she thought was necessary to save her people. I cannot hate her for that. I can only try to find a way forward that serves everyone. Sola stared at him with those deep purple eyes. Humans live such short lives, she said softly. Less than a century. Most of you. And yet you seem to understand things that my people have forgotten. In our thousands of years. Maybe that is why we understand, Taeho replied. Because we know our time is short. We cannot afford to waste it on hate. That night, after Sola left, Taeho stood on his balcony and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, Admiral Korath was meeting with his allies. The servants had whispered about it for days. A faction called the Purists was growing stronger. Nobles who believed that the Veth bloodline must remain pure. Even if it meant the end of the royal family, they would rather die than see a human marry into their sacred line. Taeho knew he was in danger. He knew that Korath wanted him dead, but he also knew that running was not an option. If he fled, Earth would suffer. If he stayed, he might die. It was not much of a choice. In another part of the city, Dr. Yuna Park met secretly with one of her Veth colleagues, a scientist named Mira, who had become something like a friend. The Purists are planning something, Mira whispered. I do not know what, but they are moving supplies and people to hidden locations. Something big is coming. Can you find out more? Yuna asked. I will try. But be careful, human. If they discover that you are investigating them, they will kill you without hesitation. Yuna nodded. She sent another coded message to Captain Beck on the horizon. Situation deteriorating. Purist faction preparing for action. Recommend increased vigilance. Bake read the message and felt a cold weight settle in his chest. He was one ship, one crew, against an empire. What could he possibly do? But he was human. And humans did not give up. He began making more preparations. Quiet ones. Careful ones. Plans for scenarios that he hoped would never happen. Back in the palace, Sola came to Teho's chambers one more time that night. She found him still standing on the balcony, looking at the stars. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "Home," he said, "and the future. And whether there is any way for both to exist." Sola stood beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "I spoke with my mother today," she said. "I told her that you are not what I expected, that you are intelligent and respectful, and surprisingly wise." "What did she say?" "She said she knew. She said that is why she chose you." Teho turned to look at her. In the starlight, her silver skin seemed to glow with gentle warmth. Her eyes, usually so cold, were soft. "Teho," she said. And it was the first time she had used his name without his family name attached. "I have never asked anyone this question before, but I want to ask you now." Ask. What do you want?" "Not what Earth wants. Not what my mother wants. What do you, Kang Teho, truly want?" He was silent for a long moment, thinking about the question, feeling its weight. "I want to go home," he finally said. "I want to see my mother again. I want to walk through the mountains where I grew up, and feel the rain on my face." He paused, and then added something he had not expected to say. "But I also want to understand you. I want to know who you are beneath the mask. I want to see you smile. Not because duty requires it, but because you feel joy." Sola's breath caught in her throat. "No one has ever said anything like that to me before," she whispered. And then, for the first time since Teho had met her, she smiled. A real smile. Small and hesitant, like a flower blooming in winter. It was beautiful. Outside, the moons continued their slow dance across the sky, and the stars burned on, watching over two people who were slowly, carefully, learning to see each other. But in the shadows of the empire, darker forces were moving, and the time for peace was running out. The Festival of Stars was the most sacred celebration in the Veth Dominion. Once every 3 years, the people gathered to honor the ancestors who had first traveled to the stars, who had built the empire from nothing, who had made the Veth the masters of 40 worlds. The capital city was transformed. Lights floated through the air like living things. Music played from every corner. Ancient songs passed down through generations. The streets were filled with people. Silver faces turned toward the sky as the first stars of evening began to appear. Teho stood in his chambers, wearing ceremonial robes of deep blue and silver. A servant had spent 2 hours preparing him, adjusting every fold, every button, every small detail. Tonight, he would walk beside Princess Sola through the grand promenade, the wide avenue that led from the palace to the Temple of Stars. Tonight, for the first time, the people would see them together. He was terrified, not of the ceremony, not of the crowds. He was terrified because he knew that something was wrong. He had felt it for days. A tension in the air. Whispers that stopped when he entered rooms. Glances that looked away too quickly. The purists were planning something. He was sure of it. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Sola entered, and for a moment, Teho forgot his fear. She was beautiful. Her gown was white and gold, flowing like water made of light. Her hair was decorated with small crystals that sparkled like stars. The bioluminescent markings on her skin glowed softly, creating patterns of gentle light across her face and arms. "You look," Teho started, then stopped, searching for the right words. "You look like a dream." Sola smiled, that small, real smile he had learned to treasure. "And you look almost like a Veth," she said. "Almost. I will take that as a compliment." It was meant as one. They walked together through the palace corridors, surrounded by guards and servants. The empress met them at the great doors, her ancient face unreadable. "Tonight is important," she said. "Tonight, the people will see that our future is secure, that our line will continue, that the Veth Dominion will survive." She looked at Teho with those silver eyes that had seen centuries pass. "Do not fail me, human." The great doors opened, and they stepped out into the night. The Grand Promenade was a river of light and sound. Thousands of Veth lined both sides of the avenue, their faces turned toward the royal procession. Some cheered. Some were silent. Some looked at Taeho with open hatred. Taeho walked beside Sola, his head held high, his face calm. He had learned to hide his fear. He had learned to move like a Veth, with grace and dignity, but inside, every instinct was screaming at him that something was wrong. Halfway down the promenade, he saw them. 3 figures in the crowd, wearing the robes of common citizens but moving with the precision of trained soldiers. Their eyes were fixed on the procession, but not on Taeho. They were watching Sola. Everything happened in an instant. The first assassin raised his hand, and Taeho saw the flash of a plasma weapon. He did not think. He did not hesitate. He threw himself in front of Sola, wrapping his arms around her and twisting his body between her and the attack. The plasma bolt hit him in the back. Pain exploded through his body, white hot and all-consuming. He heard screaming, felt himself falling, saw the world spin around him in a blur of light and shadow. More shots fired. The guards were fighting back, but the chaos was total. People were running, screaming, pushing in every direction. Taeho hit the ground hard. He could not feel his legs. He could barely breathe. The pain was so intense that it seemed to exist outside of his body, a separate thing that was trying to crush him. Taeho, Taeho! Sola's voice, somewhere above him, hands touching his face, cool silver skin against his burning flesh. You fool, she was saying. You stupid, brave fool. Why did you do that? He tried to answer, but no words came. The world was getting dark around the edges. He could feel himself slipping away, falling into a blackness that had no end. The last thing he saw was Sola's face, her purple eyes filled with tears. He had never seen her cry before. Then everything went dark. In the throne room, Empress Vathara watched the recordings of the attack over and over. Her face was like stone, but her hands trembled with fury. The assassins had been identified. They were soldiers from Admiral Korath's personal guard. The attack had been planned for months, coordinated with precision that only military training could provide, and they had been aiming for Sola, not Taeho, Sola. Korath had wanted to kill the princess and blame it on human treachery. With Sola dead and the blame on humanity, he could have demanded that the marriage alliance be cancelled and Earth's protection withdrawn. He could have started a war that would have destroyed both the human and the royal bloodline. Instead, a human had saved the princess's life. A human had taken a plasma bolt that should have killed her. The Empress watched the moment again, Taeho throwing himself in front of her daughter, his body jerking as the bolt struck, his eyes never leaving Sola's face. Why? She whispered to the empty room. Why would he do that? In the medical wing of the palace, Dr. Yuna Park worked desperately to save Taeho's life. The Veth doctors stood back, uncertain. Human physiology was foreign to them. Their medicines, designed for Veth bodies, might do more harm than good. His spine is damaged, Yuna said, her voice tight with focus. The plasma disrupted his nervous system. I need to stabilize him before his organs start failing. She worked for hours, using a combination of human medicine and Veth technology. The other doctors watched, some curious, some skeptical, some openly hoping that she would fail. Sola stood in the corner of the room, refusing to leave. Her ceremonial gown was stained with Taeho's blood, but she did not seem to notice. Her eyes never left his face, his still, pale face that looked so fragile on the medical table. Will he live? She asked. I do not know, Yuna admitted. The damage is severe, but humans are strong, stronger than most people think. He saved my life, Sola said quietly. He knew he could not survive a direct hit, and he did it anyway. That is what humans do, Yuna said. We protect the people we care about, even when it costs us everything. Sola looked at her with those ancient purple eyes. Do you think he cares about me? Yuna paused in her work, just for a moment. I think, she said carefully, that he would not have risked his life for someone he did not care about. The night passed. Taeho remained unconscious, his body fighting a battle that no one could see. His vital signs rose and fell, stable one moment, critical the next. Sola did not leave his side. She held his hand, her cool silver fingers wrapped around his warm brown ones. She talked to him, though she did not know if he could hear. "When I first met you," she said softly, "I thought you were nothing. A tool. A means to an end. I was cruel to you, and you responded with kindness. I insulted your people, and you defended them with dignity." She touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw. "You showed me what it means to be truly strong. Not power over others. Not conquest. But the strength to stay soft in a hard world. The courage to care when caring is dangerous." Tears fell from her eyes, silver drops on golden skin. "You cannot die, Kang Taeho. I forbid it. Do you hear me? I forbid you to leave me alone." Outside the medical wing, the palace was in chaos. Guards searched every corridor for more assassins. Nobles gathered in small groups, whispering about what had happened. Admiral Korath had fled with a group of loyal ships, disappearing into the depths of space. The purists had shown their hand, and now the Empire stood on the edge of civil war. But in that small room, surrounded by machines and medicine, none of that mattered. All that mattered was one human, fighting to live, and one princess, learning what it meant to love. 3 days passed. On the morning of the 4th day, Kang Taeho opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was silver. Sola was asleep in a chair beside his bed, her head resting on her arm, her hand still holding his. She looked exhausted, her gown wrinkled, her hair falling loose around her shoulders. She looked beautiful. Taeho tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. He squeezed her hand instead, a weak pressure that was all he could manage. Sola's eyes snapped open. She stared at him for a moment, as if she could not believe what she was seeing. "Taeho," she whispered. And then she was crying, really crying, and holding his hand to her face, and saying his name over and over again. "You came back," she said. "You foolish, brave creature. You came back to me." Taeho smiled, weak but real. "I made a promise," he whispered. "I said I wanted to see you smile." Sola laughed through her tears. "And I promised to show you," she said. "So you are not allowed to die. Not now. Not ever." Outside the window, the sun was rising over Veth Prime, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. It was a new day. And everything had changed. Recovery was slow and painful. Taeho spent 2 weeks in the medical wing, his body fighting to heal from wounds that should have killed him. The Veth doctors marveled at his resilience. They had seen soldiers die from lesser injuries. But this human refused to surrender. "Your kind is remarkable," one doctor admitted grudgingly. "You should not be alive. Yet here you are." "Humans are stubborn," Taeho replied with a weak smile. "It is our greatest strength and our greatest flaw." Sola visited every day. She brought him books and music and news from the outside world. She sat beside his bed for hours, sometimes talking, sometimes simply being present. The cold mask she had once worn was gone. In its place was something soft and warm, something that looked a lot like devotion. The relationship between them had changed completely. Before, they had been 2 prisoners forced together by circumstance. Now, they were something else. Not quite lovers, not yet, but more than friends. They had passed through fire together, and the fire had burned away everything false. "I never thanked you properly," Sola said one afternoon. "For saving my life. You do not need to thank me." "Yes, I do. You could have let me die. The assassins were aiming for me, not you. If I had died, you would have been free. The marriage would have been cancelled. You could have gone home." Taeho looked at her with serious eyes. "I would rather die than let that happen," he said simply. "Why?" "Because somewhere along the way, you stopped being my captor and started being someone I care about. I do not know when it happened. I do not know how. But it did." Sola took his hand, her silver fingers intertwining with his brown ones. I feel the same way, she said quietly. I have never felt this way about anyone. I did not even know I could feel this way. When I saw you fall, when I saw all that blood, I thought my heart would stop. Hearts are stronger than we think, Taeho said, both Veth and human. Outside the medical wing, the Empire was falling apart. Admiral Korath had fled with nearly 100 warships, taking with him many of the Veth Navy's most experienced commanders. He had established a stronghold in the outer systems and declared open rebellion against the Empress. His message was broadcast across all Veth channels. The Empress has betrayed our people. She has allowed our sacred bloodline to be contaminated by human filth. I call upon all true Veth to rise up and restore the purity of our race. Death to the alien. Death to the traitor Empress. Long live the Dominion. The purist faction was larger than anyone had realized. Korath had been building his power for years, quietly gathering supporters among the military and the nobility. Now those supporters revealed themselves, declaring their loyalty to the Admiral and their rejection of the human marriage. Civil war had begun. The Empress came to visit Taeho on his 15th day in the medical wing. She entered alone, without guards or servants, and stood at the foot of his bed. You saved my daughter's life, she said. It was not a question. Yes, you nearly died doing it. Yes. The Empress was silent for a long moment. Her ancient face was unreadable, but her eyes seemed softer than before. I have ruled this empire for 300 years, she said finally. I have seen countless acts of courage and cowardice. I have watched heroes rise and fall. I have learned to judge the hearts of beings by their actions, not their words. She stepped closer to his bed. When I chose you for my daughter, I did so because of your genetics. I saw you as a tool, nothing more. A means to save my bloodline. I did not care about your feelings or your wishes. I did not see you as a person. I know, Taeho said quietly. I was wrong. The words hung in the air. An empress admitting she was wrong. It was not something that happened often. You are not a tool. The empress continued. You are a man of courage and honor. You showed more loyalty to my daughter in one moment than many of my nobles have shown in centuries. She reached into her robe and pulled out a small object, a crystal that glowed with inner light. This is a communication stone, she said. With it, you can contact your ship. The Horizon. I have ordered my people to lift all restrictions on your movements and communications. Taeho stared at the crystal, not understanding. You are free to leave, the Empress said. If you wish to return to Earth, I will not stop you. The marriage will be cancelled. Your planet will retain its protection, at least until the civil war is resolved. Taeho's heart raced. Freedom. After all these months, he could finally go home. He could see his mother again, walk through the mountains of his childhood, feel Earth's rain on his face. He looked at the crystal in the Empress's hand. Then he looked at Sola, standing in the doorway, her face pale with fear. No, he said. The Empress raised an eyebrow. No? No? I am not leaving. You would stay? Even now? With war coming? Taeho sat up straighter, ignoring the pain in his back. Your Majesty, when I first came here I hated this place. I hated being a prisoner. I dreamed every night of escape. But things have changed. He looked at Sola again, and his voice softened. She has changed me. And I believe I have changed her. What we have now is real, not forced. If I leave, I would spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been. The Empress studied him for a long moment. Then, for the first time in Taeho's memory, she smiled. You are a worthy match for my daughter, she said. I did not see it before, but I see it now. She placed the crystal on the table beside his bed. Keep this anyway. You may need it before this is over. She turned to leave, but stopped at the door. The war will be difficult, she said without turning around. Korath has powerful allies and a large fleet. I do not know if we can win. Then we will fight anyway, Taeho said. That is what humans do. The Empress nodded once, then left. Sola rushed to Teho's side, her eyes bright with tears. "You stayed," she said. "You could have left, and you stayed." "Of course I stayed." He reached up and touched her face gently. "I told you, Sola. I want to see you smile. I want to understand you. I want to build something real with you. How can I do that from the other side of the galaxy?" She leaned down and pressed her forehead against his, a Veth gesture of deep affection. "I do not deserve you," she whispered. "You deserve everything good in the universe," he replied. "And I intend to give you as much of it as I can." 3 days later, news came that changed everything. The ESS Horizon had entered Veth space. Captain Hyun-Woo Baek stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the stars streak past the windows. He had disobeyed direct orders from Earth Command. He had risked his career, his freedom, and possibly his life. But when Dr. Park's final message had come through, describing the assassination attempt and Teho's injury, he had made his decision. He would not abandon one of his own. The Horizon was a small ship, barely a destroyer by Veth standards. It carried a crew of 200 and weapons that the Veth probably considered toys. Against Korath's fleet of warships, it was nothing. But it was human, and humans had a way of surprising people. Baek sent a message to the Imperial Palace. "This is Captain Hyun-Woo Baek, of the Earth ship Horizon. I am here to offer my assistance to the Empress Vithara and to stand with my fellow human, Kang Tae-ho. Earth may not be able to send an army, but we can send one ship. Sometimes, one ship is enough." The message was received in the palace throne room. The Empress read it with an expression that might have been amusement or respect. "One ship," she said softly. Against an empire in flames, Sola stood beside her mother, her hand clasped in Teho's. "One ship is how it always starts," Teho said. "One ship. One person. One choice. That is how humans have always changed the universe." The Empress looked at him for a long moment. "Then let us see what one ship can do." Outside the palace windows, the first lights of the horizon could be seen. A small star among thousands, burning bright in the darkness. The war was coming. And for the first time, humanity would fight alongside the Veth, not as servants or subjects, but as allies, as equals, as family. The Ember Rift was a graveyard of stars. Ancient suns had died here long ago, leaving behind clouds of burning gas and fields of asteroids that stretched for millions of kilometers. It was dangerous, unpredictable, and impossible to navigate without expert knowledge. It was also where Admiral Korath had chosen to make his stand. His fleet numbered over 200 warships. They hung in the darkness like silver sharks, their weapons powered, their crews ready for battle. The Imperial fleet, weakened by defections and divided loyalties, could only gather half that number. The War Council met in the Empress's command ship, a massive vessel called the Eternal Flame. Around the table sat the highest-ranking officers of the Imperial Navy, their silver faces grim and worried. Teho stood among them, still recovering from his wounds but refusing to stay behind. Beside him was Captain Baek, the only human commander in the room, looking calm despite the odds. "We are outnumbered 2-1, Admiral Vera said, pointing to the holographic display that showed the enemy positions. "Korath has chosen his ground well. The rift is filled with hazards that will make our formations useless. If we attack directly, we will be destroyed." "Then we do not attack directly," Teho said. Every Veth in the room turned to look at him. "The human speaks?" Admiral Vera said, his voice dripping with contempt. "What could you possibly know about space warfare?" "I know history," Teho replied calmly. "Human history. We have been fighting wars since before we had writing. We have learned many lessons in blood and fire." He walked to the holographic display and began manipulating it, showing different scenarios. "Korath expects you to fight like Veth," he said. "Direct assault, honor, strength against strength. But what if you do not fight like Veth? What if you fight like humans?" "And how do humans fight?" the Empress asked. "With tricks," Teho said. "With traps, with plans that seem like madness until they work." He explained his strategy. It was complex, dangerous, and completely against Veth military tradition. It involved feints and retreats, hidden forces and suicide runs, deception and misdirection. It was the kind of plan that only a human would create. "This is madness," Admiral Vera declared. "You want us to run away? To hide? To use tricks like cowards?" "I want you to win," Tejo replied. "Is winning not more important than looking brave while you lose?" The room fell silent. It was a direct challenge to Veth honor. The kind of statement that could get someone killed. But the Empress held up her hand before anyone could respond. "We will try the humans' plan," she said. "We have nothing to lose but a war we are already losing." The battle began at dawn. By the timekeeping of the Eternal Flame, the Imperial fleet moved into the rift in traditional formation, appearing to walk directly into Korath's trap. The purest ships opened fire, their weapons lighting up the darkness with beams of deadly energy. But the Imperial ships were not where they appeared to be. Tejo's plan used the rift's natural interference to create false signals, ghost images that looked like warships but were nothing but electronic shadows. The real Imperial fleet was hidden among the asteroids, waiting. Korath's ships chased the shadows deeper into the rift, spreading out their formation, breaking their defensive lines. That was when the trap was sprung. The Horizon led the attack. Captain Bake's small ship dove out of an asteroid cluster, its weapons blazing, targeting not the enemy warships but their communication relays. In moments, Korath's fleet was blind and deaf, unable to coordinate. The hidden Imperial ships struck from all directions. What had seemed like a disadvantage, being outnumbered, became an advantage as the purest fleet was surrounded and cut into pieces. The battle was chaos and fire. Ships exploded in brilliant bursts of light. Debris filled the void. Thousands died in moments, but Korath's flagship remained at the center of the fleet, protected by his best ships, too strong to destroy with conventional attacks. "We need to kill Korath," Tejo said. "Without him, the purists will fall apart." "How?" Captain Bake asked over the communication channel. "His ship is a fortress. We board it," Tejo said. "A small team, fast and quiet. Cut off the head, and the body dies. That is suicide," Sola said. She was on the Eternal Flame, monitoring the battle from the command center. Her voice was tight with fear. "Maybe," Tejo admitted. "But it is our best chance." He gathered a boarding team. 20 volunteers, half human and half Veth, the first mixed unit in the history of either species. They loaded into a small shuttle and launched into the chaos of battle. The shuttle dodged weapons fire and debris, slipping through the gaps in the enemy formation. Tejo piloted, his hands steady despite his still healing injuries. Beside him, Captain Bake manned the weapons, clearing a path through the enemy fighters. They reached Korath's flagship and forced entry through an emergency airlock. The fighting inside was brutal and close. The Veth warriors on the team were stronger and faster than the humans. But the humans were more unpredictable, more willing to take risks, more creative in their violence. They covered each other, adapted to every situation, refused to die even when death seemed certain. They fought through corridor after corridor, leaving bodies behind them. Half the team fell along the way, Veth and human alike, bleeding out on the cold metal floors. But the survivors pushed on. They found Korath on the bridge of his ship, surrounded by his personal guard. He was massive, even larger than Tejo remembered. His silver skin covered in old scars, his eyes burning with hatred. "So the human has come to die," Korath said. "I am glad. I wanted to kill you myself." "You can try," Tejo replied. The battle was swift and terrible. Korath's guards fell quickly to the combined force of the boarding team. But Korath himself was a warrior of legendary skill. He cut through the remaining soldiers like they were children. In the end, only Tejo and Captain Bake remained standing. Korath advanced on them, his weapon dripping with blood. "You fought well, for primitives," he said. "But this is where it ends." He swung at Tejo, a blow that would have cut him in half. Tejo dodged, barely, feeling the blade pass centimeters from his face. He struck back, but his weapon bounced harmlessly off Korath's armor. Bake fired from the side, but Korath turned the shot away with his gauntlet. They fought together, human and human against Veth, but Korath was too strong, too fast, too skilled. He knocked Bake aside with a backhand blow that sent the captain crashing into a wall. Then he turned his full attention to Taeho. "Your kind will never be our equals," Korath snarled. "You are insects. Accidents of nature. You exist only because we allow it." He struck Taeho down, standing over him with his blade raised for the killing blow. "Die knowing that your sacrifice was meaningless." The blade began to fall, and then it stopped. Sola stood in the doorway of the bridge, a plasma rifle in her hands, her shot having pierced Korath's shoulder. Behind her were more Imperial soldiers, flooding onto the ship. "Wrong," she said coldly. "His sacrifice gave us the time we needed." Korath turned to face her, his face twisted with rage. "You betrayed your own people," he spat. "For this animal." "No," Sola said. "I saved my people." She fired again, and this time she did not miss. Korath fell, his body crashing to the deck, his eyes staring sightlessly at the ceiling. The greatest warrior of the Veth Dominion, dead by the hand of his own princess. The bridge was suddenly silent. Taeho struggled to his feet, his body screaming with pain. Sola ran to him, catching him before he could fall. "You fool," she whispered, holding him close. "You brave, impossible fool." "We won," he said weakly. "We won," she agreed. Outside the flagship's windows, the Purist fleet was in retreat. Without Korath's leadership, without their command ship, the rebellion was collapsing. Ships surrendered, others fled into the depths of space. The war was not over, not completely. There would be months of cleanup, of hunting down remaining rebels, of rebuilding what had been broken. But the back of the Purist movement was broken. The Veth Dominion would survive. And at the center of it all, a human and a princess held each other in the blood-soaked bridge of a conquered ship, surrounded by the bodies of enemies and friends. "I told you," Taeho whispered. "Humans are stubborn." Sola laughed, tears streaming down her silver face. "Yes," she said. "You certainly are." She kissed him then, for the first time. There in the ruins of victory, as the stars burned on outside, and a new future began to take shape. It was not a fairy tale kiss, soft and perfect. It was a real kiss, messy and desperate, and full of everything they had been afraid to say. It was exactly right. 1 year had passed since the Battle of the Ember Rift. The galaxy had changed. The Purist rebellion was crushed, its leaders dead or imprisoned, its followers scattered to the edges of known space. Admiral Korath had become a symbol of failure, his name spoken only in whispers, a reminder of the price of hatred. The Veth Dominion stood stronger than ever. But it was a different kind of strength. The old ways of isolation and superiority were fading. New alliances were forming. For the first time in their long history, the Veth were learning to see other species as partners rather than subjects. And at the heart of this change were two people, a human who had become a symbol of courage and a princess who had learned to love. The wedding took place on a warm morning in spring, when the gardens of the Imperial Palace were in full bloom. It was a ceremony unlike any the Dominion had seen before. A joining of two traditions, two cultures, two worlds. Taeho wore white, the color of celebration in Korean tradition. His clothes were simple but elegant, a blend of human and Veth styles. He stood at the altar with his head held high, no longer a prisoner or a tool, but a man who had earned his place through blood and sacrifice. Sola walked toward him through a rain of flower petals. Her gown was silver and gold, flowing like water in sunlight. The bioluminescent markings on her skin pulsed gently, creating patterns of light that seemed to dance with joy. She was beautiful, but more than that, she was radiant with happiness. The Empress performed the ceremony herself. She spoke the ancient Veth words of binding, then stepped back as Taeho and Sola exchanged the traditional Korean bows of respect. When they finally turned to face each other for the final vows, the crowd fell silent. "I, Sola, daughter of the Empress, heir to the Veth Dominion, take you, Kang Taeho of Earth, as my husband and my partner." I promise to stand beside you in joy and sorrow, in peace and war, in this life and whatever comes after." Her voice was strong and clear, carrying across the garden to every ear. Taeho took her hands in his. "I, Kang Taeho, son of Earth, survivor of storms, take you, Sola, princess and warrior, as my wife and my partner. I promise to protect you with my life, to support you with my strength, to love you with everything I have, for as long as my heart still beats." The Empress raised her hands. "By the authority vested in me by 10,000 years of tradition, I declare these two joined. They are one flesh, one purpose, one future. Let no force in this galaxy tear them apart." The crowd erupted in cheers. Veth and human voices mixed together, a sound that would have been impossible just a year ago. Taeho looked at Sola, and she looked at him. And in that moment, nothing else existed. No empires, no politics, no ancient hatreds. Just two people who had found each other against all odds. He kissed her, and the cheers grew louder. 6 months later, the palace was full of excitement again, but of a different kind. Sola was pregnant. The news spread across the Dominion like wildfire. Scientists and doctors gathered from every corner of the empire, eager to study this unprecedented event. The child growing in Sola's womb was the first human-Veth hybrid in history. Some worried about what this would mean. Would the child be healthy? Would it inherit the best of both species or the worst? Would it even survive? The doctors ran test after test. They analyzed every cell, every gene, every tiny aspect of the developing life. And what they found amazed them. The child was not just healthy, it was extraordinary. The genetic stagnation that had plagued the Veth royal line for generations was gone. The flexible, adaptive nature of human DNA had merged perfectly with the refined genetics of the Veth. The child would have the best of both worlds. Veth, longevity, and grace, combined with human resilience and passion. "This child will change everything," the chief geneticist told the Empress. "If this pattern holds, if more hybrid children are born, the decline of our species could be reversed completely." The Empress looked at the images of her grandchild, growing steadily in her daughter's womb. "The human was right," she said softly, to no one in particular. "Sometimes, imperfection is exactly what we need." For the first time in over 100 years, Empress Vithara laughed. When Taeho heard about the results, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he had not even known he was carrying. All the pain, all the sacrifice, all the moments when death had seemed certain, it had all been worth it. "We did it," he said to Sola that night, as they lay together looking at the stars through their window. "We did," she agreed, her hand resting on her growing belly. "We saved an empire. We saved each other," Taeho corrected. "The empire was just a bonus." Sola laughed and snuggled closer to him. "I want to show you something," she said after a while. "Before the baby comes, before everything changes." "What?" "Earth, I want to see your home." Taeho's heart swelled with emotion. He had dreamed of this moment for so long, had almost given up hope that it would ever happen. "Then let us go," he said. They traveled on a small ship, just the two of them and a handful of guards. The journey took weeks, crossing vast distances of empty space. But they did not mind. They had each other, and they had time. When Earth finally appeared in the viewport, a blue and green jewel hanging in the darkness, Sola gasped. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "It is home," Taeho replied. They landed in Korea, in the countryside near his family's village. The landscape was nothing like Veth Prime. It was smaller, simpler, a world of mountains and forests, and rivers that flowed with ordinary water under an ordinary yellow sun. But to Taeho, it was perfect. His mother met them at the landing site. She was old now, her hair gray and her face lined with age, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. "My son," she said, embracing him with tears streaming down her cheeks. "My son has come home." She looked at Sola with curiosity but no fear. Taeho had sent messages over the past months, explaining everything. His mother was a practical woman. She did not care that her daughter-in-law was an alien princess. She cared only that her son was happy. "You must be Sola," she said. "Welcome to our family." Sola bowed deeply, a gesture of respect that she had learned from Taeho. "Thank you for welcoming me, honored mother. I promise to take good care of your son." Taeho's mother laughed. "From what I have heard, he takes care of you as much as you take care of him. That is a good marriage." They spent a week in the village. Taeho showed Sola the house where he grew up, the school where he learned to read, the mountain paths where he had walked as a boy, dreaming of the stars. Sola experienced everything with wonder. She tasted human food for the first time, strange flavors that made her laugh with surprise. She walked through rain, feeling the water fall on her silver skin, marveling at how something so simple could feel so alive. She met the villagers, who stared at her with wide eyes but welcomed her with warm hearts. On their last day, Taeho took her to a hillside overlooking the village. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. "This is where I used to come when I wanted to think," he said. "I would sit here for hours, watching the world change colors." Sola stood beside him, her hand in his, her belly round with their child. "What did you think about?" "Everything. Nothing. The future. Whether I would ever do something that mattered." He looked at her, at this alien woman who had started as his captor and become his partner, his love, his reason for living. "I never imagined anything like this," he said. "I never imagined you." "And I never imagined you," she replied. "A small creature from a small world who would turn my entire universe upside down." She placed her hand over her heart, a human gesture that she had learned from him. "I love you, Kang Taeho. I did not know what love was until I met you. Now I cannot imagine existence without it." "I love you too, Sola. More than words can say. More than I knew was possible." They stood together in silence, watching the sun sink below the horizon. "What should we name our child?" Sola asked. Taeho thought for a long moment. "A name for both worlds," he said finally. "Something that means hope. Because that is what this child is. Hope for your people and mine. Hope for a future where we do not have to be enemies or strangers." Sola nodded slowly. "Hope," she repeated. "I like that." She leaned her head against his shoulder as the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. "Then hope it shall be," she whispered. Above them, the universe stretched out in infinite possibility. Two species that had once been strangers were now joined by love and blood and sacrifice. A new chapter was beginning. Not just for the Veth Dominion or for Earth, but for all beings who dared to reach across the void and find connection with others. It was not a perfect ending. There would still be challenges ahead, struggles and setbacks and moments of doubt. The galaxy was a vast and dangerous place, and no love could protect against every storm. But standing on that hillside, as night fell over a small village on a small world in a vast cosmos, Taeho and Sola had something more precious than perfection. They had each other, and they had hope. And sometimes, that was all anyone really needed.